on the screen. I just froze.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Wow, exciting.
One of Hollywood's greatest directors believed he could control everything: his films, his sets, even the stars who worked for him. But one woman would change that forever. She entered his world like a dream come true, and left it as his greatest regret. Behind the scenes of the movie he thought would secure his legacy, whispers of obsession, betrayal, and quiet revenge began to spread. To this day, the story of what really happened on that set feels like a secret Hollywood tried to bury. A secret that would follow him for the rest of his life. Most people believe that Tippi Hedren became a Hollywood star because of her talent or a breakthrough audition. But the truth, it started with a single 60-second TV commercial for a diet drink in 1961. She wasn't an actress. She wasn't chasing fame. She was a 31-year-old model and single mother, just trying to make ends meet. Then, out of nowhere, her phone rang. And on the other end was the most famous director in the world, Alfred Hitchcock. Hitchcock had been watching television with his wife Alma when he saw Hedren on the screen for just a few fleeting seconds. Something about her, her look, her posture, the icy calm in her expression, stopped him cold. He didn't just want her in a movie. He decided she would be his next leading lady, and his next obsession. Without a single acting credit to her name, Hedren was offered an exclusive 7-year contract with Hitchcock. He invited her to his office, told her he was making a thriller about birds turning on people, and that she would be the star. No audition, no discussion. It was a Hollywood dream, but one that came with a price she couldn't yet imagine. For Hedren, it was the kind of call that changes a life forever. She went from commercials to the front door of Universal Studios, about to headline The Birds. But she had no idea that behind Hitchcock's polite, controlled demeanor was a man whose interest in her went far beyond filmmaking, and would soon take a disturbing turn. And what happened once the cameras started rolling would shock even her. When filming for The Birds began in 1962, Tippi Hedren thought she was stepping into the role of a lifetime. Hitchcock had promised her a thrilling production with cutting-edge effects, mechanical birds, clever camera tricks, and a few harmless live birds for wide shots. But as the shoot went on, something felt off. Hedren noticed the crew whispering, and the tension on set started to grow. Then came the moment that would haunt her forever, the infamous attic scene. She was told the birds would be fake, that they would safely simulate the attack. But when she stepped into that small wooden room, Hitchcock gave a chilling command. Instead of props, a handler walked in with crates of live seagulls, crows, and ravens, angry, squawking, and ready to fly. For 5 brutal days, Hedren was pelted, clawed, and bitten by real birds. Their beaks tore at her skin, leaving her bruised and bleeding. One raven even scratched her face, narrowly missing her eye. Exhausted and terrified, she collapsed into tears, but Hitchcock insisted on just one more take. By the end of that week, she was so traumatized she required a doctor on set. And she began to realize that this role might not be a career breakthrough, but a trap she couldn't escape. And yet, the danger wasn't only physical. What Hitchcock was planning next would cut even deeper. And it had nothing to do with birds. Behind the camera, Alfred Hitchcock was a genius. But behind closed doors, he began to show Tippi Hedren a side of himself that was far more disturbing than any of his thrillers. He became fixated on her, not just as an actress, but as an object of total control. He followed her on set, isolated her from other cast members, and made constant, unwanted advances. Hedren later described how Hitchcock's attention shifted from professional to personal, in a way that terrified her. He sent her inappropriate notes, demanded that she always be available to him, and even tried to dictate what she wore and how she lived outside the studio. When she rejected his advances, his behavior turned vindictive. He began to humiliate her in front of the crew, gave her grueling scenes that pushed her to the brink, and let his anger simmer in chilling silence. This wasn't just an uncomfortable workplace. It was a psychological game. Hedren felt trapped under a contract that gave Hitchcock total control over her career. And the more she resisted, the more he seemed determined to break her. By the time filming ended, she wasn't just the star of The Birds. She was the target of Hitchcock's private obsession. And it was only going to get worse during their next collaboration, Marne. Because Hitchcock's retaliation for her rejection would be the kind of Hollywood nightmare most actors never escape. After The Birds, Tippi Hedren hoped the nightmare was over. But Hitchcock wasn't finished with her. He immediately cast her in Marne, 1964, a psychological thriller he envisioned as his next masterpiece. On the surface, it was a golden opportunity. 2 leading roles in back-to-back Hitchcock films could have made her one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, his obsession had turned into calculated revenge. Hedren had rejected his advances. That simple act of defiance was something Hitchcock couldn't forgive. On the Marne set, his cruelty escalated. He gave her impossible direction, demanded endless takes for emotionally grueling scenes, and even used his power to isolate her from the rest of the cast and crew. Co-stars like Sean Connery later admitted they sensed something off about the way Hitchcock treated her. When the film wrapped, Hedren thought she could finally walk away. But Hitchcock reminded her of the 7-year contract she had signed. She was effectively his property in Hollywood terms, and he used that power to freeze her career. He refused to cast her in any new projects and blocked her from taking roles offered by other studios. Hedren later described those years as feeling like a golden cage, trapped by fame but unable to work. For an actress at the peak of her visibility, it was professional suffocation. Hitchcock's obsession had evolved into a slow, silent punishment, and it nearly erased her from the industry. But what the world didn't know was that Hitchcock himself would come to associate this period with something he rarely admitted: regret. Alfred Hitchcock was famously stubborn, rarely admitting mistakes. Yet in later interviews, the director reflected on a choice that haunted him, not just as a filmmaker, but as a man. In public, he never fully acknowledged the abuse Hedren endured, but in private moments and rare interviews, he alluded to the toll those years had taken on his work and his reputation. He once told colleagues that forcing a non-actress into his world and letting his personal fixation bleed into the production of Marne had been a mistake. Industry whispers suggested he realized too late that his behavior had backfired. He had destroyed the very muse he had tried to possess. And here's the twist that surprises many film buffs. When Hitchcock publicly mentioned a regretful filmmaking moment, he didn't point to The Birds or Marne. He pointed to an earlier scene from Sabotage, 1936, where he let suspense push moral boundaries too far. But some biographers and critics believe that was a smokescreen, that his real regret was personal, tied to the scandal he never wanted to name. By the time Hedren's story became public decades later, the damage to her career had already been done, and the master of suspense had left behind a legacy as dark as any of his films. But Hedren wasn't finished. In the decades that followed, she would reveal the full story, and Hollywood would finally take a hard look at the man it once called a genius. For decades, Tippi Hedren stayed mostly silent about what really happened on those sets. Hollywood, in the 1960s, wasn't ready to hear the truth about one of its most celebrated directors. Hitchcock went on to receive awards, critical praise, and the title of Master of Suspense, while Hedren's career never fully recovered. To the outside world, she was just another actress who faded from the spotlight. But in 2012, the truth resurfaced with the release of the HBO film The Girl, based on Hedren's experiences. For the first time, audiences saw a chilling portrayal of Hitchcock's obsession and the torment she endured. Then, in her 2016 memoir, Hedren finally told the story in her own words. She described the relentless harassment, the physical and emotional toll of filming, and the silent punishment that stalled her career. Her revelations shocked the industry, and many viewers who had grown up idolizing Hitchcock's films began to see him differently. In the years since, film historians have been forced to grapple with an uncomfortable truth. The brilliance of Hitchcock's work came with a darkness that forever scarred the woman he tried to control. Modern critics now discuss his legacy with a mix of awe and unease. Hedren, meanwhile, found peace in her later life through animal activism and speaking out, turning a nightmare into a cautionary tale for generations of actors to come. And while Hitchcock never faced public consequences in his lifetime, his reputation now carries a shadow that no suspense classic can erase.